Dominican Republic, Ecuador, Venezuela, Colombia, Peru, Nicaragua, always present, Argentina as well, USA, Puerto Rico, to everyone, blessings. Don't stop that applause. There's celebration in the house of the Lord. Look how beautiful. Look how beautiful. Right on time. How are you? Cuba, Puerto Rico, Panama, Guatemala. I learned all the flags when I was school, but many years have gone by. If you see the Argentinian flag, everybody knows it, but some people might even ask, well, where is it from, Uruguay? And the same thing happens to me with flags. Please pardon my ignorance. I suggest to those at home that when you come here and you bring your flag, put the name of the country on it, because I forget it. I'm foolish. But welcome to everyone. God bless all of you. Very well. Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good night to those that are connecting from different parts of the world. Up until this moment, we've already had our Holy Supper, the commemoration of the almost 300 people that got baptized. And we're transmitting now live to all the people that can't be here for the celebration, the music, the praise, the worship. That we reserve for ourselves, but the sermon is transmitted to the rest of the world. So to those that connect, God bless you. Thank you for being there. Are we ready, people? Yes or no? Very well. I'm going to transmit what I believe God told me to tell you. A long time ago, when I was just 8 years old, you can say, "Ooh, if only you made it to my age looking like this." I understand the envy. And that's the homage that jealousy makes to success. The truth is that when I was 8 years old, I asked my parents if they could get me a puppy so that it could be my own pet. There was always a dog at home, but I wanted it to be my own. So I asked, could you get me one? I asked, could you find me one in an intentional way? Because back in my day, a dog was not something that you could buy. You wouldn't sell or buy dogs. Back in my day, you would just find one. One day, one simply appeared, and nobody asked too many questions. You would just find one. I don't ever remember buying a dog. They never took us to get our vaccines. Can you imagine them buying a dog? No. And dogs weren't categorized by breed, but by color. The question was always, do you want a black dog or a brown dog? Those were the only options we had. Like when you get on the plane and they ask, chicken or steak? Well, it was brown or black. It never occurred to anyone, oh, I want this breed or a Bichon Frise. No. It was a dog, all the same breed, and there was also no guarantee that if you asked for black or brown, that you would get it, because then my dad would go out to the street and mysteriously bring back whatever was available, a street dog of a very doubtful color, according to the results of the way his parents crossed paths. And my father accepted to bring me a puppy, but he made it very clear, the prenuptial agreement with my dog, that I had to be in charge of taking care of it. He said, this is your dog. I had to feed the dog, give him water. That wasn't so difficult. Feeding him, not so hard either. Because back in those days, there was no balanced diet. You would just throw the crumbs down to the dog. The dog would eat banana peel, eggshell, cotton, whatever. And I had to also pick up and clean its excrements. And I accepted that contract with a whole lot of pleasure, because in the end, I would be getting a puppy. And at first, our honeymoon phase was beautiful, because we played together, we had fun, the little dog followed me everywhere, and he immediately knew that at the age of 8, I was the alpha in the house. But after some months, I began to get a little tired, like any child would. And sometimes my father would yell at me, I told you to pick up what your dog did. I don't want to be stepping on what your dog did. And that last phrase was the one that I didn't like to hear. Your dog. I wouldn't have cared if he had said the dog you play with, or our dog, the family dog. But my father always made me remember that it was my dog. Period. In sickness and in health. In prosperity and in poorness. It was always my dog. We were confined to the same leash. And so my dog went from being an option to an obligation. From being a pet to a chore in the house. Getting up Saturday morning to clean up after the dog. All that he did in the yard the previous night. The dog went from being someone that I played with to someone that I had to take care of. And I think that we all know that sensation. I'm not necessarily referring to a dog, but a good psychologist would call this the claustrophobia that comes with commitment. When you commit, there's a certain claustrophobia, psychologists say, where you have to continue to be committed. Just instead of people reminding you it's your dog, they say it's your in-law, it's your husband, it's your boss, it's your employee, it's your pastor, it's your child, oh, it's your mom, or any relationship that we feel trapped in. So one thing is to be trapped with a little puppy, which sooner or later you'll grow up, the puppy will as well, but it's completely different to be trapped in a relationship, a human relationship. There are those that say, look, my in-law is a vampire, he never works, my wife treats him as if he were a child that we have to maintain. Others say, oh, you have no idea what my mother's like. Oh, because from far away she looks lovely. But when you get close, she sucks out your desire to live. She drains you. Others say my wife is someone that I can never speak with without arguing. She enjoys being warlike. She's like Putin. Others say, no. What exasperates me about my husband is his passivity. He lives in his own world. He doesn't care about anything, not what happens to me, not how I feel. Now, if we expect sensibility out of anyone towards our needs, it tends to be the members of our family, our relatives. When we suffer emotionally or physically, we desire that our family respond in a certain way, but on certain occasions they act as if they didn't care. I was reading a book from an author, a 30-year-old woman that discovered that she had to undergo a mastectomy. That is a surgery which is used to remove a breast to try and prevent a cancer that wouldn't be operable later on. So her and her mother never had good communication. And so that is why that woman doubted sharing the news. She was trying to figure out how to say it. And one day while they were having lunch, she decided to share the news. She said, "Mom, I just realized through horror that I have to undergo a mastectomy." And the mother nodded her head and out of nowhere went to a different topic. She said, "You know, daughter, your sister opened up an Instagram." And the author said, "That's the way that my mother always related to me since I was a little girl. In one way or another, she would say, 'Daughter, I won't speak about difficult things with you no matter what. And if I find out about something or you tell me something that I don't like, I'm simply going to ignore it.'" The author said, "I can't believe that that I'm telling my mother that they're going to remove my breast, and her response is that my sister opened up an Instagram." So we all have a story like this, in one way or another. People that are close to us, but we are indifferent to them. Parents, in-laws, spouses. Sometimes life with our relatives becomes difficult. It's not like a neighbor that we can distance ourselves from by moving away and we don't see them anymore. Or maybe an employee that, as a last resort, could just be fired. I'm talking about people close to us, relatives, family members, a mother that complains, an uncle that takes advantage, a father that we can never please no matter what we do, a mother-in-law that has been asking for 20 years what her daughter saw in you. It's been 20 years and she still can't accept it. 8 kids later, she's still saying, daughter, you deserve something better. And sometimes it looks like an elevator that we're forced into. We all cram ourselves in knowing that it'll just be for a short period. Sometimes we go in because we say, if not, I'll have to wait a long time. I have an appointment, I have to get to this floor. Sometimes it's just 4 or 5 floors and we get off. We cram into the elevator without having to have any visual contact with anyone because we know that it'll last less than a minute, a couple minutes, and never again will we see all these occasional people. But when it has to do with family members, you feel the same sensation you do in an elevator, with the difference that we feel that we'll never be able to get off. We're trapped in that same elevator. During Christmas, during New Year's, during a birth, during weddings, during birthdays, during funerals, during Christmas Eve, we know that we'll have to go back and sit down with those people again. In one way or another, we say, I'm trapped. There are certain stores where you can find certain goods. Here in the U.S. and other countries, there's a certain section in the store with merchandise on offer at a discount with a tag that says sold as is, to not say that it's defective. In Argentina, my mom would take us to a store in Billinghurst, the city where I was born, the town where I was born, and it was called The Mess. I think the word implies what it was all about. The Mess. And I assure you, you wouldn't find any Prada, Gucci, Tom Ford, Hugo Boss, no Valentino in there. You would find products that were defective, that the factories would discard, and that's why they would sell them at a cheaper price. And my mom would say, because you got good grades, let's spend, and let's go to the mess. Let the world burn. Let's spend money. And sometimes I would come home with shoes that were different colors. I would get a red shoe and a blue shoe because I had the other matching pair at home. As is, that means that these articles are defective or they have some sort of failure from the factory. So as is means, look, here you're going to find defects. A stain that can't be removed, a zipper that doesn't close, a button that doesn't work, and obviously, as we're warned in those stores that it's all merchandise that's defective, there's a fundamental rule. No returns, no refunds. You can't exchange. There is no possible remorse, because if you were looking for perfection, you went into the wrong store, into the wrong aisle. Now let's think about somebody close to us in our lives. Maybe the person that we know best. And that person comes with a label on them, a tag. Has defect from the factory. Defective goods. Don't laugh that way, because we also have the same tag. Take it as is. A tendency to lie. This man or this woman is a gossiper. They can't avoid it. Their tongue is faster than their brain. They have a passive spirit. He or she has an uncontrollable temperament. You have to discover what the defect is, because it's there. But at these stores, they don't tell you what the defect is. My mom would look at the treasures and say, look, it has no defects. I think they messed up, because it has no defects. And then you realized that the shirt looked like this. And if it's there, it's because there's a defect. You wouldn't find excellent products there. And as far as human relationships, when we seek perfection, then we also went into the wrong store, the wrong aisle. It's like those that go to a congregation, a church, and pretend that they're going to find perfection. There are tons of people like this, people that say, I need a healthy doctrine with a pastor that preaches the truth, with holy people. If you find a church like this, then you're going to ruin it as soon as you go in. First, because if there's a church like that, they're hypocrites. There is no perfect church. There is no perfect congregation. And sometimes we seek perfection when we can't even offer it. We demand perfection when we can't offer it in exchange. So sometimes when we begin a relationship, with the illusion, with the foolish desire that there are certain people that come without defects, that's when we'll try to control them, to change them, make them think differently. We always come to God singing that beautiful song that was sung at the Crusades of Billy Graham, "Just as I am." We love to say, "Lord, I'm here just as I am," but we never accept our neighbors just as they are. Just as I am, but the other person has to change. And we've all gotten to know someone manipulative, all of us, or someone that's very difficult to deal with. It's like walking on glass or moving through quicksand when we speak to them. And sometimes we feel that friends, family members are like constant parasites in our organism that we can't get rid of. It sounds harsh, it sounds rude, but that's how it is. And though we'd like to, we can't evade them. And a future without that person is not an option. And so we ask ourselves, why God has allowed us to live through that? I know there are people saying, I was given the most difficult family. Speaking about parents and grandparents, you have no clue. We've all had to deal with difficult people. And the theological reason as to why we should all deal with difficult people at one point or another is because catfishes exist. Let me explain it a little better. In the northeast of this country, here in the U.S., the codfish is not only delicious, but it's also a great commercial business. Fishermen make a fortune selling shrimp and codfish. But the public demand created a problem for those that transported the codfish, or the catfish, I'm sorry, or the codfish. First they would transport it frozen, but freezing the fish would take away a lot of the flavor. When people would try it in a different place than where it was caught, it would have a different taste. So they tried experimenting, transporting the fish alive in salty water, but that turned out to be worse, because not only was it more expensive, on top of the codfish losing its taste, it would arrive bland and squishy, because it was in a tank. Finally, it occurred to someone to put the codfish in a tank with its natural enemy, the catfish. And throughout all the transportation until it arrived at its destination, the catfish would follow the codfish the whole way there. When the codfish would arrive, they were in great fitness. They didn't lose their taste. They tasted even better. Their texture was unaffected. That's why I say we've all had a catfish swimming in our tanks. And maybe there are long seasons where we have to live or find ourselves in gatherings with them. Or maybe it's someone from our job that's so irritating that puts us on our knees many times a week. You want me to say more? Every church has its own catfish. And God puts them in the same tank to be sure that the codfish don't arrive bland without flavor. Don't tell anyone next to you, "God bless you, my fellow catfish." No, because it'll sound terrible. We're all codfish. There's a catfish from time to time, but they come to the other service, not this one. And that tension in the tank has a divine purpose. God tells us, I see what you're going through. I know about that manipulation. I know about that injustice. I see you, I'm observing you. And I'm using this experience of yours to train you. It's not a punishment. I'm training you. I'm training your character. I'm training your resilience, your temperament. Your threshold for frustration. So instead of us complaining over the people that irritate us, we have to start to see them as tools, training tools. There are training tools all around us. Of course, we would all want a life without catfish. Who wouldn't? But life comes with these catfish already in the tank. James 1:2 confirms. Whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. James says, consider it as a time to rejoice because you know that God will always test your faith, and consistency gives us an opportunity to develop. Just to paraphrase it a bit. Your consistency, our patience has the opportunity of training us. And you say, yeah, but it's just that I was driving and that person cut me off. As if the car was driving itself. It was an Asian that cut me off. Others say, no, it's just that she never lets me finish a phrase. She's always interrupting me. Or she says, he blows his nose like a horn on a ship. I can't stand it. By that laughter, I discovered that they have a partner that blows their nose that way. Or, no, when he drives ahead of me, he turns without even putting his signal on. Or he parks his car right in front of my driveway. It drives me crazy. It bothers me. If only he used deodorant and mouthwash and ate with his mouth closed and calmed down his baby. Can't she hear that the baby's crying? What I'm saying is that there are people that think this way. Now, it's not about a hostile arrival or about violating a certain law or committing a crime. No, it's what I call personal aversion that exasperates us. Not too long ago, literally, God knows I'm not exaggerating. A woman wrote to me on social media a very long text message. She was very frustrated because she said that I should leave my hair completely undyed, that this salt and pepper look took away some of my wisdom. But she had a completely theological explanation. She said that if I didn't do it and if I didn't leave my hair completely white, then she would be obligated with a lot of pain to stop watching my messages. Yeah. My hair torments the poor woman. And I was thinking, the color of my hair, is it really worth her frustration? Is she really willing to sacrifice her happiness, the messages, due to a petty thing like the hair of the person that preaches and the phrases that we use to refer to all that bothers us and irritates us? It reveals who's truly suffering. In this case, I'm not suffering over my hair. She is. But we always say, it irritates me, or it drives me crazy. It bothers me. It annoys me. Well, who is it bothering? Us, the person that's complaining. Who are the ones that suffer? Well, those that complain. I don't understand why he got a tattoo. I don't get it. If he's a man of God, he shouldn't drink beer. If he's a man of God, he wouldn't dress in black. Or those people shouldn't wear that hat. One gets irritated and the other person doesn't even realize. That's why the Apostle Paul wrote to Ephesus in Ephesians 4:2. He said, be completely humble and gentle. And he used a word that in the original Greek is exactly that, because sometimes through translations, you can lose the etymology of the word. He said, bearing with one another in love. He's saying that we're not always going to love deeply. Sometimes that love will require tolerance. The word I tolerate you has bad press. It sounds like I'm barely tolerating you. But Paul says, no, tolerate each other. What does it mean to tolerate? Well, don't be irritated by petty things, by foolish things. There are things that have to fly outside of our radar, and we call that longanimity. Longanimity is having a constant mood when facing difficult situations, difficult people. It's so great to see people with longanimity. Whoever they encounter, they don't lose their smile. There are people that have public jobs that have to have longanimity, not always empathy, because sometimes it's impossible to empathize with somebody that comes in shouting, demanding a coffee or a certain plate of food. Sometimes it's difficult to have empathy, but tolerance is what allows us to smile despite the fact that the other person has lost their mind, their composure. This week I discovered a magnificent phrase that says people are difficult to hate when you see them up close. When you see them from far away, they're easy to hate, but when you see them up close, they're difficult to hate. Anyone is difficult to hate if you look at them from up close. Sometimes I take pictures with certain people that are well-known, famous people, that have a controversial life, sometimes very controversial. And immediately, many evangelicals arrive saying, how can you be their friend? How can you be friends with that Philistine, or whatever they say? And I always ask myself, or I always tell myself, if only they took time to get to know them the way I did, they would realize that beneath that public image, you would find a simple being, someone that cries, a being that God loves profoundly. When I encounter these people, it's very different than what I saw on TV or the person that I saw on magazine covers. I realize that, just like everyone else, they are broken people as well. One time, a woman that was once a sex symbol, a very famous woman, confessed to me, I was abused as a little girl, and my whole life I suffered. I could never have relations because it marked me. And she was on the cover of many magazines. She was very famous. It seemed like she sold sex. However, she was hurt, and all you found in her was a scared little girl behind all that makeup. But immediately you label. When we see someone from far away, it's very easy to repel or hate. This will sound conceited, but I'm convinced of what I am going to say. I know that most people that criticize me viscerally, if they got to know me personally, if they had just one coffee with me, I know that immediately they would change their opinion. They would love me immediately. At least I think so. Yeah. I said it would sound petulant. But I'm a guy that's easy to love. I don't think that I'm a guy that's difficult to deal with, or a guy that's difficult to love, or a guy that doesn't stop talking. Nah. I think all those people that see me from afar, those that were led by just a little piece of a message or an edit on YouTube or a certain phrase, if they got to know me personally, I'm sure they would change their opinion. But since they can't get close, the easiest thing to do is label, defame. They just put me in a box and that's it. And on top of it, if we see someone from afar and we put them in a group, a homogeneous group, in a bag, they're even easier to hate. For example, you could say, look, all the Democrats in this country. For example, the Kirchnerists in Argentina, the right wing, the left wing, whatever it is, whatever example you want to use. In the case of the U.S., let's say all the Democrats are anti-Christians. They hate God. And then someone answers you and says, yeah, but what about your best friend that accompanied you in the hospital when you were about to die? When your husband was on a trip and your friend took you? As far as I know, she's a Democrat and she voted for Obama and Biden. Yeah, well, she's different. She's not so much a Democrat like the rest. So it's very easy to say, oh, all of Jehovah's Witnesses are going to hell with their erroneous and false doctrine. Really? Does that include the neighbor? That when you had a heart attack, she went to go visit you in the hospital. She picked up your kids from school. She even took them to her house and fed them. She sent them to school the next day until you got better? Well, she's not like other Jehovah's Witnesses that I know. It's easy to say, all unbelievers are sons of the devil. Maybe that's the case with your son-in-law that never set foot in a church. Oh, but he's a great husband. He's very hard-working. He's a great father. He's always talking to me. He's a different type of unbeliever. It's easy to say, all Catholics are idolaters that don't know Christ. They're sons of the great whore. But what about that nun that you had as a teacher in elementary school, and she was the woman with the most integrity that you ever met, and her love for God was contagious, her love for the Bible was contagious, and you know that she was sincere in her devotion. That nun was the least hypocritical person, and she adopted you as her own. What I'm trying to say is that when we see people up close, we cannot hate them. We're not just a number or a statistic or a human group in a bag. No, we're a person with a face and a name and an identity. I always say that when we speak about something and not someone, Not too long ago, I preached the sermon, Faceless People, which I profoundly recommend. And there in a fragment, I said that when I hear certain leaders say, what's going to be the church's posture with lesbians, with bisexuals, with transsexuals, with transgenders, and anything else that they invent in the following hours? What will be the church's posture with divorcees? They speak about the church's posture as if the responsibility to love was contained within these four walls or just its denomination. And I always answer, no. What's going to be your posture if that divorcee is your son, or if it's you, or if the person that aborts is your own daughter? We can't take the face off the patient and just be left with the disease or pathology, because that's the way, that's the resource to not have to love them, to not have to empathize. It's the people that abort, the homosexuals, those that get their girlfriends pregnant. No, it's not them. We can't put them in a bag. These are people. And so sometimes we want to know the church's posture to deal with the symptoms, to not get dirty with the problem, to not get involved. In psychology, we call that is called dehumanization. Dehumanization. And it's nothing more than objectifying people, to label them and not have any sort of empathy. Dehumanization always begins with language, through vocabulary, through lexicon, and that has fed the violations of human rights, war crimes, genocides. Dehumanization is what makes slavery possible, torture, human trafficking. We've seen it all throughout history. During the Holocaust, the Nazis described Jews as rats. That was important for the Führer, that nobody saw Jews as people. They had to be seen as rats, and they were represented as rodents. They said that they carried diseases the same way they described rodents. And they wanted the German children, the Aryan race they called, to feel a certain hatred towards the Jews. They were called the savage natives. Once you label them and put them in a bag, they're no longer people. And sometimes as Christians, we commit the same atrocities. Those that have the false doctrine, the Baptists, those that voted for Maduro, those that have gay pride, the Catholics, the fans of this, the Mormons, the apostates, the prideful Argentinians that always buy soccer matches, the typical Colombians that sneak into the stadiums. It bothers you, doesn't it? Of course it does. Because there are many Colombians that say, no, I don't do that. I didn't get into the AC Ducks to get into the final. And there are Argentinians that say, I didn't steal the game. I wasn't even watching the game. But that's how we are. The ticos, the catrachos, the guanacos, the Colombians, the venecos, they're all the same. They're not humans. They're just enemies that we should hate. They have to be on our antipodes, on the other side of the crack. That's the strange phenomenon of social media. Social media can be a great tool or a great sewer in humanity, where it removes humanity and impunity. There are no values. It's all insults, reciprocal humiliations. People write things to each other that no one would ever say face to face. No one would say in someone else's face what they write online, but it's always thought that what you say is a sin and not what you write. But from the abundance of the heart, our fingers also write. So on social media, we see opinions that have no responsibility. They lack the truth, and what's worse, they lack education. I'm not talking about academic preparation. Oh, poor guy never went to Harvard. No, I'm talking about the education from our parents. They never told us, go down the street and insult your neighbor. You filthy dog, you're going to hell. No, our mothers would slap us across the face. Respect our next door neighbor. Nowadays, we've even lost that education, that primary education from our parents, because social media gives no impunity. or gives us impunity to say whatever we want. And when we lose the capacity to see God's face on the person that we don't know, when we lose the capacity to see the other person as a creation of God, we profane our faith. We profane against our beliefs. We're profane. That, ladies and gentlemen, is to be an apostate. It's not somebody that preaches something anti-biblical. No, it's profane your faith when we don't have the capacity to see that the other person is also made in the image and likeness of God, even though they think differently, even if they're from the opposite political party, left, right, Muslim, Catholic, even a witch. But the main point is that we tend to see how difficult it is to live with others, and we can't imagine how difficult it is to live with us. Let us not forget that we're also someone else's catfish. Oh, the codfish. No, we're also someone's catfish. Or using Jesus' lexicon, we become obsessed with the sawdust in someone else's eye. Meanwhile, we ignore the log in our eye. Those that sometimes say, Jesus never made a joke, it's because they never read the words of the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 7:3. He says, "Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye?" How can you say to your brother, "Hey, let me take the speck out of your eye," when all the time there is a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite! First take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. This is what Jesus said. I don't know if you applauded, if they applauded or if they laughed. Because he's talking about someone that goes up to his friend to remove some sawdust, but he has a plank of wood like Pinocchio sticking out of his face. But the guy doesn't realize it. He's the classic blind, emotionally blind man. He doesn't see the log in his eye. But he can't stop giving advice to people that aren't even asking for it. He's always looking for people that have little specks of dust in their eyes. So if we're propense to acting like this guy that's always going down the road, going the wrong way, and he hears on the radio that there's a crazy man driving on the wrong side of the road, the guy hears that and says, "No, it's not one, it's hundreds that are driving on the wrong side of the road." So the most painful part is when we don't realize that we are also in the aisle of sold as is, defective. The people in this congregation and those that are watching me are the most failed. But we fail to recognize that we have that tag on us, sold as is. So when people criticize me, I say, well, yeah, I'm one of the most failed ones. I never said that I'm in the aisle of excellent products. I'm not a Tom Ford. I'm not Valentino. I'm not Dolce & Gabbana. I am just the mess. And that is why we try to divide the world. Look at what hypocrites we are. We try to divide the world into two groups. Normal people like ourselves, and then the difficult people. We're the codfish, and then all the rest, of course, are catfish. But everyone, each and every one of us, have habits that we can't control. It's just that nobody knows. We have failures that we can't correct. It's just that we hide them. And we have defects that we cannot mend. The problem is we just got used to them. Look all around you. Please, look around. This is the ramshackle group that God has to work with. Look. You're all so beautiful. You're so beautiful. No, but really, because the same way that glass is propense to shattering, all of us, we're all predisposed to doing what we shouldn't if we're given the right conditions. That predisposition is what theologians call deprivation or iniquity. I like deprivation better. We're depraved by nature. That's why the Lord has to offer us grace daily. We lie and we sacrifice our integrity to avoid a ticket. Oh, I swear, officer, I didn't see the speed limit. Really? Over a ticket? If it were over $1 million, it would also be sad, but it would make a little more sense. But just one ticket? People that lie. Oh, but you didn't see you were speeding? No. We gossip about someone to feel superior for a moment. To say, well, at least I'm not like him. Or we write foolish, stupid things online to show that we're jealous over God's will and His kingdom. And what happens is that from time to time, someone that is more exposed than ourselves, someone with a more public figure than our own, suddenly they rise in this way. But not because they're more failed than us, but because they're more public. A writer is accused of plagiarism. A politician's career fails in the midst of an affair. The son of a Christian family that comes to church is found in drugs or leaves a young girl pregnant. It shouldn't surprise us, but the ironic thing is how the majority of us react. Really? Oh, how disappointing. They seemed so normal. As if we were exempt of going through things like this. It's just that we foolishly believe that we're normal and everyone else is a catfish. We say, oh, well, I get it. I'm a sinner. But Christ has already sanctified me. And yes, it's a theological truth. But careful that you don't cross the line to becoming a Pharisee, to think that today we're more forgiven than the first time the Lord forgave us. No, every day we're in the same condition. In the same condition as all those people that we judge. Every time I mention, and I've said it before, Jose Rodriguez, the Puma, where we've been friends for a long, long time. Somebody writes to me, he should fix his problem with his daughters before he speaks about God. First of all, we don't even know if he has problems with his daughters, his family. That's just what these news shows talk about. They're just gossipers that they're repeating. It's not that the Puma was their neighbor. It's not that they said, oh, I saw his daughters. No. Second, who are we to tell him to fix his family? Nobody has a perfect family to demand perfection from someone else. Now, fine. What did Jesus say about difficult family members? Because you might be surprised to know that if someone had a difficult family, it was definitely Jesus. And it's possible that you'd be surprised to see that his family was far from perfect and they didn't value him. In Mark 6:4, Jesus said, a prophet is not without honor, except in his own town, among his relatives, and in his own home. They had asked Jesus to speak in the synagogue, not because they recognized him as the Son of God, but because he was a promising young man. The people were proud of this young boy from the neighborhood. He had been progressing so much as a rabbi, and they said, why don't you come and pray one Saturday here at the synagogue? And so he went. And when he spoke, he referred to himself as the Messiah. He said, I am the Messiah. I've come to fulfill the prophecy just the way the prophet Isaiah laid it out. And that's where Jesus' family members said, or his neighbor said, isn't this the carpenter, the son of Mary? Isn't this the brother of Simon and John? Don't his sisters live around us? I dated one of this guy's sisters, and now he's saying he was sent from heaven? This guy made my furniture. He sold me a chair. And now he's saying he came from heaven, that the Father sent him? It's like saying, oh, it's the plumber's son, or it's the accountant on the third floor. It's the construction worker that dated my sister-in-law. We think that God can't speak through common, ordinary people. And Luke 4:29 says, they got up, drove him out of the town, and took him to the brow of the hill on which the town was built, in order to throw him off the cliff. This is how angry they were. Notice that. It's not that they didn't give him an offering. There's been many times where I preached so poorly that they didn't want to give me an offering, but I don't remember anyone trying to throw me off a plane. But here, they wanted to throw him off a cliff. But it seems like he went through the people, squeezed through the people, said, excuse me, and then left. Nobody had the courage to throw him off a cliff. So Jesus' neighbors tried to kill him. That's how his ministry began. Look how successful he was. How'd it go? Well, thank God they didn't throw me off a cliff. But there's something more unpleasant that is not written. Because it could say, and they took him to the top of the hill to throw him off the cliff, and Jesus' brothers, because they mention at least 4 brothers without counting sisters, and Jesus' brothers came to him to defend him. Maybe 1, maybe 2. But no, his brothers did not appear. That's not what happened. When Jesus was in a difficult trial, his brothers became invisible. Where were they? I think they were there because it was Jesus' debut, his first time preaching in the synagogue. You think his brothers wouldn't be present? But where were they when they wanted to kill him? I hope that they weren't part of the group that wanted to kill him, but there was a moment where they did speak. There was one occasion on which they were seen publicly. And not because they were proud of Jesus, but because they were ashamed of him. When his family heard about this, they went to take charge of him, for they said, he is out of his mind. Jesus' brothers thought that he was a lunatic. They weren't proud of him. They were embarrassed by him. Mom, your son is crazy. You should hear what the people are saying about him. Mom, the people are saying that he went crazy. That he truly is crazy. In fact, Mom, a person asked, why don't we do something to stop him? And another one of Mary's sons said, good thing Dad isn't here, so he can't see what he became. We assume that Joseph died because we didn't hear about him. And it gets worse because in John 7:3 says, Jesus' brothers said to him, leave Galilee and go to Judea. Leave this neighborhood. There in Judea you can find your disciples. They'll see the great works you do. No one who wants to become a public figure acts in secret. Since you are doing these things, show yourself to the world. And they said this to him because not even his brothers believed in him. You notice the sarcasm in their words? Oh, so you're the Son of God? Why don't you go to Judea? Why don't you go to Rome? I don't know, Athens. You Son of God. How can Jesus deal with these guys? How can you advance when our own family is stopping us or putting hurdles in front of us? Well, Jesus gives us the answer, and he also shares a secret. Jesus immediately didn't try and control his family's behavior. Ergo, he did not allow their conduct to control his own. He didn't demand that they agree with him. Never. He didn't say, hey, let's have a family meeting. Everyone has to love me because if it's like this, I won't be able to be the Messiah. No. He wasn't in a bad mood when they insulted him. He didn't make it his mission to please them. Oh, I can't please Mom. Oh, I have to do something for my brothers to accept me. No. Because each one of us has the fantasy that our families have to be like the Ingalls. Remember? Little House on the Prairie with Michael Landon? With the expectation that they're the ones that are going to support us the most, that our own blood will always be with us. But no, Jesus never had that expectation, never. Look how he defined his family in Mark 3:35. Whoever does God's will is my brother and sister and mother. Of course, you see it and you say, how cold, right? You say, how unloving. No, it wasn't unloving. They didn't believe in him. They were ashamed by him. They insulted him. He said, my family are those that do the Father's will. When Jesus' brothers didn't share the same convictions, he didn't try and force them to do so. He recognized that his spiritual family could provide what his physical family could not. If Jesus himself could not force his family to accept their convictions or his convictions, what makes us think that we can force our family, that mom has to understand me, that my in-laws have to agree with me? What makes us think that? We can't control the way in which our family reacts to us. I come from a family that never even supported my talents. Dad, I want to draw. I want to be an actor, a host. No, you're going to die of hunger. You have to go to industrial school. And we never spoke about it again. They didn't even believe in what ran through my veins, much less a calling. So in respects to other people's behaviors with us, our hands are tied. You cannot manage their behavior or what others will think. You have to get past that naive thought that if we do well, people will see it. And they'll act as it corresponds. The whole world knows that we've sent $43 million to the rest of the world since 2020. But there are many people that continue to criticize us. You're all going to hell. Even by donating all these millions, not even by doing that can we change certain people's mentalities that have already dehumanized us. They already dehumanized me. They placed me in a bag, and now I'm part of those pastors that are just thieves, period. I can make the dead rise, I can make all mother-in-laws disappear, but I would still just be a thief of a pastor that makes miracles, but I'm still a thief. Maybe some recognize the good that we do. Maybe they recognize it, maybe they don't. But we cannot exercise control over the way that people react towards us. If we had a brother that was always jealous, we could give them a home. We could say, hey, I'm going to give you a brand new car. But even then, they're going to speak against us. That happened to me. One of my own brothers, he dedicated his last years to having interviews to bring defamation to me. That was his fame. He wanted to speak ill of Dante since he didn't know me anymore. It had been many years since we had spoken. He would speak about the old me. He would say, back when he was 15, he had a girlfriend. I don't even remember that. Only he does. And there's no point in me saying anything or doing anything because he decided to dehumanize me and hate. It was easy for him. So you can dehumanize even a family member. And while we think that we can control people's behavior, we're going to be prisoners to their opinions. What they said, what they didn't say. Will they approve? Will they disapprove? It's a game of unjust rules. Jesus didn't judge his family, nor should we. We don't know if Joseph, Jesus' stepfather, ever supported his adoptive son. We assume that yes, because at the age of 12, when he gets lost in the temple, Joseph was present. So maybe if he took him to the temple, maybe he supported him. But we don't know if at one point or another he doubted that he was truly the Son of God. But we do know that his eternal Father did support his Son. When Jesus got baptized, the Father with an audible voice said, "This is my Son, whom I love. With him I am well pleased." Matthew 3:17. I think that I'll say something that will be up for theological debate. I think that healed Jesus in one way or another. Because his brothers were ashamed of him. Yeah, they knew that, or he knew that he was the Son of God. But when you don't have a single person in your family saying, yeah, you're right, but you hear God's voice saying, you're my beloved Son, I cannot assure you that your family will ever give you the blessing that you're seeking, but I can give you my word that God will do it. Allow God to give you what your family never gave you. If your father here on earth never helps you, you can never please him, then allow your celestial Father to take that place. Let him say to you, you are my beloved son, beloved daughter. Hallelujah! Maybe you accepted the Lord as your Savior, but you never accepted him as Father. And these are two different things. Allow God to give you what your family has taken from you, what they've deprived you from. Allow God to fill that void that others have left. Observe the words of the Apostle Paul in Galatians 4:7. So you are no longer a slave, but God's child. And since you are his child, God has also made you an heir. He says it twice. You are God's child, and he will give you his blessings because you are his child. He's saying, if you're doubting it, I'm going to say it twice. You are a child of God, and Jesus never allowed the complicated dynamic in his family to affect his calling in life. But let's go a few years forward, and let's extract a small golden nugget in the book of Acts 1:12, where it says, Jesus had already risen. He had already gone through the cross, of course. And then it says, then the apostles returned to Jerusalem from the hill called the Mount of Olives. When they arrived, they went upstairs to the room where they were staying. All the apostles and they all joined together, along with the women and Mary, the mother of Jesus, and with his brothers. So what had happened if Jesus had strangled his family when they didn't support him, saying, well, who's going to support me if you don't? No, he gave them compassion, time, patience, grace. In fact, one of his brothers was made an apostle, and the others became missionaries. We see this in Scripture. They believed in him, especially when they saw the empty tomb. So this morning, afternoon, evening, night, wherever you're watching from around the world, I want you to do me a great favor. Let's do ourselves a big favor. Stop for a moment and think about all the things and all the people that make up your world. First, the things. First, your home, maybe a car. The things that are tangible. And you'll see that there aren't many. We don't have many things. Then stop to think about the people that make up your world. And I say things and people. I have to clarify because sometimes we mix them. First think about things, now the people. The people. Let's go through the gallery of faces that are significant in our lives. I want you to go through it mentally. The pages in the album book of the people that you deal with most frequently. Can you see their faces? Because if not, we dehumanize them. I want you to see your partner, your children, your best friend, your coworkers, your children's friends' parents. You don't see them often, but you do see them from time to time. Then your relatives, uncles, in-laws, son-in-law, daughter-in-law, mother-in-law, father-in-law, your next-door neighbor, some brothers and sisters from the church, and freeze these mental images for a moment while I tell you how some of them feel. And I'm going to do it through a metaphor, but based on real life. Once a year, I tend to have a checkup with a doctor. I go to my family doctor, Reagan Chan. Generally, this Asian doctor, before he sees me personally, he sends an order online for me to have an analysis so that when he looks at it, he has the results in his hands. And every time I go through these analyses, it coincides on the same day that I'm going to see the doctor. So first the secretary confirms my information. She doesn't look up to see me, to look at me. She just asks to confirm my information. Then a nurse comes along that doesn't speak Spanish, and since I don't speak English, there is no possible communication. And through signs, well, I speak English, but it's a British English. She spoke an American English. And through hand signs, she makes me sit on a bed and puts some cold suction cups on my chest. Then another nurse comes and puts a band around my bicep and squeezes a black little balloon to check my blood pressure. Then they ask me to take off my shoes. They measure me. They weigh me like a bull that's about to be taken to the slaughterhouse. Then they give me certain vaccines that I was missing. Then they ask me to pee in a little cup, whether I feel like it or not. And I don't know why it always embarrasses me to give the warm cup back to the nurse. I wish I could at least freeze it or put it in a fridge for a little while. And just know that I've denied giving fecal matter, and I've never allowed a colonoscopy or a prostate exam. I'm not saying it's right. Don't take my example. But in my case, I'm waiting for AI to discover how to do these things with laser without any human intervention. After having finished all these preliminaries, they send me to a cold room and tell me to wait for the doctor. There's something in this matter of being poked, prodded, measured, and drained. It makes us feel like lab rats. It makes us feel dehumanized. I know I'm doing it for my own good, but nobody looks at me, nobody speaks to me. I'm just a thing that has to be measured, weighed, and controlled. I sit down on an aluminum bench and I stare at the wall. I'm sitting here on this bench. My dignity was left 3 meters away from there. Well, here's the point. Someone in your world, at this very moment, feels like I did in that doctor's office with Reagan Chan. Someone in the gallery of the people that you know is seated in a cold aluminum bench of insecurity, trying to close the back part of their hospital gown out of fear of leaving the little bit of pride they have left. And that person needs you to not dehumanize them anymore. They need to be seen as a person. They need to not be thrown into the bag of all the patients that have appointments with a doctor today. All those catfish patients. So then my doctor comes along, Reagan Chan. I know he's always very busy, but he has one particularity. He makes me feel as if I were the only patient he would get to that day. He always goes into that cold room, shakes my hand, smiles, and says, "My beloved Dante, what a pleasure to see you." I once gave him one of my books, and he always makes a comment about it as if he read it yesterday. I know that's not the case, but he always comments on it. He asks me about my family, my job. He asks if I'm working too much, if I'm traveling too much. He asks me for the 10th time, the 10th year in a row, if I'm exercising, if I'm going out to walk at least once an hour, or for an hour a day, if I'm taking care of my cholesterol. He also asks if the church is growing, if he can watch certain messages on YouTube. I say yes. For the 10th time, after 10 years, I say yes again. And while he asks me these questions, he listens to my heartbeat. He asks me to open my mouth to say, ah. He remembers some of my fingers that are twisted and bent. And he asks if I still type viciously. I never feel like he's being nosy, but he makes me feel like someone important. He makes me feel like a person, not a patient. And after those few minutes, Dr. Chan proceeds with this task of hitting my knees with his rubber mallet. He listens to my chest, and as I'm buttoning up my shirt, he tells me that it was a pleasure to see me again, and that if I have any doubts, I can call him at any time. And it's something I've never done, nor will I do. The truth is that we're not friends. We see each other once a year, and it's been about 10 years now. But he always treats me like a unique person. And I want to assume that he also does it with his other patients. Most likely, I'm one of the many catfish in his tanks. Most likely, he sees me as the classic patient that comes once a year. The patient that says that he has perfect health. But even though he sees me as a catfish, he doesn't try to change me. He doesn't manipulate me. He doesn't ask me for advice that I don't ask for. And when I tell him that I'm not following a strict, healthy diet, he smiles and says, "Come on, Dante, take care of yourself. You're very young." I love that final phrase. You're very young. What do you mean? What do you mean? Say it again? Oh, you're very young. He doesn't judge me. He doesn't label me. He doesn't say, "Oh, you're like all the guys that don't take care of themselves." He doesn't say, "Typical Hispanic that just does whatever they want. I don't know why they come." He doesn't say, "What else can I expect from an Argentinian?" This Asian doctor doesn't throw me into a bag. He's taught me how easy it is to make someone feel dignified. He asks me 2 or 3 questions and waits for my answers. He shows me that he's worried about how much I'm resting. That's why God shows us that life comes with catfish in the tank. And sometimes we're the codfish that is being followed, and sometimes we're the catfish that is following someone else. We're also irritating to others. There are certain people that irritate us, but we also irritate others. So, like Jesus, we have to learn to not want to control someone else's life, nor can we allow their criticism to control our lives. We cannot demand that they agree with us. We can't be in a bad mood when they insult us. Our mission in life is not to please people, not even our family members. And though maybe for a certain season we're trapped with a group of people in a small elevator, we have to learn to say that they're not enemies, they're training tools. And glory to God that sometimes we're so crammed in there because people are very difficult to hate when you see them up close.
Bendito. Bendito apiñamiento, gente. Dale un aplauso al
Give an applause to the Lord of Lords and King of Kings.
Una vez que te pongas de pie,
Once you're on your feet, come on, celebrate with me with a great applause to heaven. If you believe that God has spoken, if you believe that the Lord has touched us deeply today, our soul, our heart, blessed be the Lord. I'm going to give you the same phrase that was so funny to you. You have to go through life, and if you can, post it on social media. If you knew me personally, you would immediately love me. That's not pride. That's to have a healthy self-esteem. It's marvelous to say, yeah, if you were to have a coffee with me, you would fall in love with my personality. I'm convinced of it. I'm not those that say, oh, I'm spiky, I don't want anyone to get close. No, I know it. I can't do it with everyone, but that's how we have to get along. When somebody criticizes us, we have to say, oh, poor person, they don't know me. That's what Juan Carlos Ortiz, the founder of this church, taught me. He's currently in the Lord's presence. He would always say, oh, poor guy. Hey, Juan Carlos, but he spoke against you. Yeah, well, you know, with that face, with that life, not even the devil wants him. So I love him. But Juan Carlos, they kicked you out of their group. Yeah, but I'll just make a bigger circle and put him back in. But Juan Carlos, they don't love you. Yeah, but Jesus died so that they can love him, not so that they could love me. What a beautiful life philosophy. Poor guy. Come on, lift up your hands to heaven. We're going to pray. Father, if this morning, afternoon, night, you want to receive Christ, say, Lord, come into my life. Forgive my sins. Write my name in the book of life, Lord. Forgive me. I want to be a new creation. I want to receive you as my Savior. Come into my life. Change me. You're the only one that can do it. And after this prayer, all together we'll pray to the Lord. Lift up your hands and say, thank you for this word, Father. Lord, help us to be better. Help us to change, to transform ourselves, so that every day we can transform ourselves and grow to the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ. But now, just as we are, we come before you, and we commit, Lord, to accepting our neighbor just as they are. We are not the ones that will change people. We cannot produce conviction of sins. We cannot apply legalism so that somebody changes. We cannot give law to transform any heart. You are the one that does it, Lord, and we give up these difficult people. We place them at your feet. You tell us this afternoon, morning, night, you say, I've seen the manipulation, I've seen the injustices, I've seen when you've been mistreated, I've seen the psychological abuse, I've seen the emotional abuse upon you, but be sure that I am working on your character. These are tools that I've placed in the elevator of your life to train you for what I have ahead of you, for these new assignments that will come, for the new challenges that I have for you. Lord, I've transmitted to your people what I believe you told me to share, and I know that there are many burdens with family members, with loved ones, with friends, with partners, associates. Help us, Lord, to understand that we are all made in your image and likeness. Forgive us for dehumanizing groups, for throwing people into bags, for labeling others as defective, for thinking that the catfish are out there and not here in front of us in the mirror. Free us, Lord, from all pride. Free us of all apathy, of all petulance, of all sovereignty, and help us to be simple. Say, Lord, you know that I am a failure. You know that there are some failures that can be seen, others that cannot. But those that take me home will find them. They'll discover them. Sooner or later, they will come to the light. And there are no returns. There is no way to get a refund. And for certain seasons, we'll be somebody's catfish, and other seasons will be the codfish to other catfish, however it may be. May each day surprise us, swimming, advancing, training us, knowing that all this produces faith, that all this generates solidness, character. Lord, I bless your people, your children. Thank you, Lord, for this morning. Thank you for those that have come from far away. I've transmitted this message, and I am calm knowing that I'm free from this word. It is left in each person's heart. It's the Holy Spirit that will bring conviction. Seal this word. Thank you for this afternoon, for this morning, for your blessing, for your glory, for your presence, for this word that fills us with joy. Lord, I bless the entry and exit of all those that are here. I bless the fruit of the land and the fruit of their wombs. I bless all that they believe, dream, think of. Lord, I bless their mornings, their nights. May the month of August be a month of liberation, a month of empathy, a month in which we'll know that this season is for just some time, like the word says. It has a beginning date and an end date, and to know that there is a purpose behind it all. We believe it, we declare it. I bless your army, I bless your children, in the body, in the soul, and in the spirit. Let us be blessed. Amen, amen, and amen. Glory to Jesus. Blessings to bless. How many receive this word? Yes or no? Welcome aboard in just a little bit. Bye. God bless you. Until next time, until next Sunday, have a great week, people. Blessings.
Apareciste una noche de soledad, abandonado y perdido te reconocí. Tu voz diciéndome no temas, yo estoy aquí. El Padre me envió por ti. Y me curaste las heridas, me sanaste, mi Jesús. Todas mis cargas las dejaste allí en la cruz. Algo tan grande no lo puedo comprender. Oigo tu dulce voz diciéndome una y otra vez: oh, 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 eres bienvenido, eres amado una y otra vez. Oh, 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 bienvenido a River, eres amado. y perdido te reconocí. Tu voz diciéndome no temas, yo estoy aquí. El Padre me envió por ti. Y me curaste las heridas, me sanaste, mi Jesús. Todas mis cargas las dejaste allí en la